All right, so let's get into Photoshop and open up at least one of the images inside Photoshop. Because I want to go in and start building a set of images, your 6 images, that start to fit your clientele a little bit. And you'll probably notice when you took pictures yourself, whether you went out on Google and searched for images, whether you got stock images that are really high quality, beautiful images, or you found someone who was at an event, took a picture, and it's a little less appealing than the other ones. I actually opened all of my pictures, and like we did last class, I pulled the tab from up here off, and I did Command minus so that I could just see all my pictures together. It helps when you're trying to build kind of the look and feel of something, that you can see as many of the assets at a time as you can. So let's open up a couple of our pictures and pull them off the tabs just so we can kind of see what we have going on here. And we're going to pick an image and start manipulating some of the treatments of that image just to see if we can't boost it up a little bit, make it a little bit more unique, give it a little personality. That way it kind of becomes a little bit ours, because everything kind of has its own treatment to it based on who took the picture, what the light settings were, quality of the camera. I mean, there's a million factors, time of day. So we're going to go in and adjust a little bit. So let's open up one of our pictures. We have it open right here. And we're going to go in and start adjusting the attributes of this picture. But the first thing I want to do is let's just take that one picture and let's go image size. So image size is going to give us the properties of that image that we saved into our photography folder, right? So we should have our client folder, we should have our style guide in a folder, we should have our pictures in a photography folder, we should start organizing our assets so you can see the quality or the size of your image, the file size, pixel ratio, resolution. So you'll see more times than not, if you saved it just off a Google search, it's going to have a resolution of 72, which is low resolution. If you found a really high quality picture off a photo site, that number should be 300 or something over 150, just to give you kind of a resolution kind of reference point, 72 being low, 300 being high, and then somewhere in between. And we talked about when you collected your 6 pictures to make sure they were at least 1,000 pixels wide, right? So now you can see that my image is 2.2 meg. That's a decent sized file. If yours says like 200K on it, that's not very good. 300K, something like that. So we're going to be looking for, as we use imagery in advertising, that we have something that has a good amount of pixels, good file size, which means good saturation of colors, good imagery, good flexible elements. So image size. So we can click OK there. Now let's go up to image and go to mode. Now, if you save something off of Google or you save something off the web, your image mode is going to be RGB, red, green, blue. In the world of print, the color mode is cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, CMYK. So 4 colors obviously are better than 3 colors. So for print production, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black is the appropriate color mode. Your images more than likely are RGB. So you're going to see what happens when we build a little flyer today and we bring in RGB color mode into CMYK color mode. There is going to be a slight color shift. And that's the reason we're going to play around with our images in RGB mode so that when we bring them into CMYK mode, they look a little bit better. They look a little more saturated. They look a little more intense in our 4 color mode. All right, so we have RGB for web, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black for print. So let's go down to adjust. So here's where we're going to start playing around a little bit. All 6 of your pictures look different, I can guarantee. There's going to be different levels of black and white. There's going to be different color saturation. There's going to be some that are brighter than others. There's going to be some that are more blue than white. It's just the nature of the beast. But we're going to introduce a little personality into our 6 pictures just to enhance them a little bit for use when we start building our advertising assets, our Photoshop assets. So let's go in and do image adjust brightness. And you're going to get a little menu that pops up like this. Now, some of your pictures are going to be more diluted than others. Depending on which picture you opened up, you're going to have kind of a different level of light that was used to take the picture. So everyone's going to get a different experience here. But the idea is that we kind of see what is going on with some of our image adjustments so that you could then apply them to any of your photos based on what you see the need of that particular image having. So, brightness and contrast. Let's take our brightness slider tab and let's slide that thing up a little bit towards the positive of brightness. Now I'm using the mill right here. So you'll see as I go negative and as I go positive, we're changing the amount of light or white inside of our image. And so the further you go to the right, the more washed out the image, or the brighter the image is. The more you go to the left, the darker the image. Now, some of your pictures I can see while I walk by your screen are like super dark because they were taken at a time when there wasn't a lot of light available. They were taken in the evening. I mean, there's any number of reasons why the brightness of a particular image would be a bit on the less saturated level. So let's make an adjustment to our first picture here. Let's crank up our brightness a little bit. Give it, a nice amount of contrast. So give it where it feels like it was taken at the peak time of day, which isn't high noon here. Peak time of day feels like 4 o'clock here. It's very weird that it gets hotter as the day goes on here. So let's crank up our brightness a little bit, and let's crank up our contrast a little bit. So I'm going to move mine up towards the 30 to 40 range in both. And you should get something, and I'm just going to turn off preview and turn on preview. So you can see what's happening in my picture, and then you'll be able to see what's happening in your picture. I want to take the grayness out of this first photo. So if your photo has a bit of that kind of soft grayness to it, like it was taken during a cloudy day, let's kind of bring the light level up and the contrast level up, which means that it's going to inject black into the shadows and inject white into the highlight areas, just kind of boosting up the quality of our image. Depending on what the application is for the photo. If we're printing this on a piece of metal, we're printing this on something that has a coating, we're printing this on something that is thick in material, you want to boost up contrast because that injects more black and more white into your image, which allows more bleed in the output, which means more ink going into the surface it's being printed on. So just be aware if you have a very soft color spectrum in your image, a very soft, equal amount of white and black, it'll print much more matted or kind of washed out than something that has a bit of a high contrast to it. So let's boost up our high contrast on our first picture a little bit. And if you check and uncheck your preview, you should see that hopefully we made a bit of an improvement to our image. You can see the cobblestone inside of the mill now. So we'll go ahead and click OK. And we're going to go through our adjustment menus just to talk through a little bit of the image processing process, just so that you can see how we can kind of uniquely build some, I don't want to say surreal, but really flexible images, ones that have good color, have good contrast, have good saturation. So let's go image adjust and let's go levels. Now, when you go image adjust levels, it's going to give you this kind of roller coaster shape. And the roller coaster shape is showing you black to the left, white to the right, so 0 to 255, and then all of the shades of gray in the image in that kind of roller coaster middle there. Everyone should have a different shape. It's just based on the level of black and the level of white in yours. Now, I did a brightness contrast adjustment in my picture, so kudos to me. I've got a pretty good bell curve in my grays, which means the shades of my colors are pretty consistent across my image. The middle little marker is our grayscale. So take that little middle marker and move it left and right. So you see this little gray? Move it left and move it right. Now, mine was right about at 1 to start with. Watch when I move it towards white. I'm going to uncheck and check so you can see what is going on with my image. Even though I boosted the contrast, brightness and contrast, which means injected more white, injected more black, I'm now moving my grayscale a little bit more to the sharper drop inside of my range of levels to kind of pull out the separation a little bit. I was right at peak grayscale, so I actually just moved mine a little bit to the right to kind of pull out the whites and the blacks and tilt the gray down a little bit. Because sometimes in high contrast you get this really like spotlight effect. So levels is a great way to then bring back in natural light. So that center marker is the really important marker in this. So let's move it whichever direction you need to get it back to a little bit of middle tone. So this is what mine looked like before. Mine had pretty much a high kind of like flashlight effect because I boosted up the brightness and contrast. I'm going to shift my grayscale a little bit to the right to bring back some of those deeper gray areas, like in this instance in my lake. My lake started to get a little washed out. So I'm just sliding that level slider a little bit to the right. Yours might be a little bit to the left. It just depends on the steepness of your gray change, which is what that kind of chart shows. So black to the left, white to the right. So if you need to inject a little bit more of the leveling out of that shift of brightness and contrast, you can move that slider a little bit to the right. If you need to boost it up a little bit, you move it a little bit to the left. And you should get an image now that has good light, good dark shadows, and is starting to level out that transition so you get a really nice looking photo. I have a buddy that's a photographer, and he uses the same settings on every single picture he uses. He does a high contrast, he pulls out the levels, he changes the saturation of the image, and he just batch does it to every picture he takes for a house. And that's become his signature. And a lot of people pay him a lot of money because all his pictures look so surreal. They look a little bit like it would be on a Disney set or something. Like everything is just so perfect in color and brightness. So let's do a little shift there, move that slider so that we can get the pictures a little bit better. So brightness, contrast, and levels. So let's go to the next one. Image adjust, curves. Now, this looks a lot like you probably noticed pie-wise from your levels. So you have your black and your white, you have that transition in the grayscale. The difference here is that we can create a curved change of shadow. So let's take our mouse right into the middle of the line that goes white and black in the X and Y coordinates. So let's take our mouse right into the middle. So you see this little middle quadrant right here? Let's click on it and bend it a little bit this way. And I'm going to move the window over so you can see what's happening. So I'm going to turn that on and off, and you can see that I'm adjusting that in more of a gradient style instead of a hard grayscale. So I'm going to bend it both directions so you can kind of see what is going on here. I can pull it up, which means I'm introducing it into the deeper grays over here. I could take that dot and slide it down and get into the lighter shades of gray. So I'm just going to bend this thing, and you can see as I rotate it what's happening. This is an arc, a white to black grayscale arc. So I'm just taking that center dot and I'm rotating it counterclockwise so you can see what's going on. I'm going to take, so as I take it that way, it does the dark filter. As I take it up towards the top, it does the light filter. And so I'm just going to bring it down, and I'm going to do an ever so slight bow towards my lighter scale of gray. So I just bowed it a little bit. I never like my kind of my levels, my grayscale levels, to be a straight line. I always like to have a slight bend towards black or a slight bend towards white, so that it gives it more of an airbrush or like a gradient transition inside of my image. So I adjust my levels and the curves on every single one of my pictures. It doesn't matter if it's the perfect time of day. It doesn't matter if I have a $5,000 camera. It doesn't matter what is going on. I always go in and adjust that transition of grayscale just to kind of tighten up the image just ever so slightly. So give that just a slight little curve or bend. Ooh, I like pink. Pink is a good color to start as a foundation. Okay, very good. So let's go ahead and click OK. Let's do image adjust exposure. Now, if you picked a really gloomy picture, you should see some pretty extreme changes inside of your image, because we are literally going in and changing every aspect of the pixels inside your image. This is permanent. What we're doing is permanent. We're adjusting the light source. We're adjusting the lights and darks. We're adjusting the white and black, right? Cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. We're adjusting those permanently inside the pixels of your picture. So you probably know exposure. So let's crank down exposure. I very rarely adjust exposure more than just a little bit. So I'm just going to pull it up by 0.5. If I'm taking the picture or I'm buying a picture, the exposure level of the image is typically pretty good. Let's pull the offset, so go to a negative number, and you can see so I'm going to take it to slightly negative number. It's pulling the greens out of my image. Negative number. And then we're going to affect the gamma rays in our picture. So if you go that way to the right, we have a work of art. We go that way to the left, we've got the background of a Mountain Dew can. If we go to the middle, we're to realism. So I'm going to take mine and I'm going to bend it ever so slightly towards the right. Now this picture is getting really high contrast, really color saturated, really transitional between white and black. I'm trying to make these trees look semi-surreal here, so that when I use them in my advertisement, they're going to print really well, or they'll look really good on the screen as a social advertisement. So some of you have some really beautiful pictures that you found for your nonprofit, so they don't need a whole lot of adjustment, because there's some really good color in the pictures that were taken. They were taken really well. So let's do OK from exposure. Let's do image adjust vibrance. Now I'm a big saturation guy. So you can see what happens when you crank it to no saturation, negative 100, all the way up to plus 100. Pop art. Look at what happens in the saturation adjustment. The in Martha Palooza right here. Plus 100 in the saturation of our image. Although I wouldn't swim in that water.
Some people do.
In that water? Is it that blue? Like it, the picture, the
No.
original picture?
Yeah.
It's brown? Is
Yeah.
it like muddy?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is matte, negative 30 in this range gives you a matte effect, which means the artboard or the canvas isn't absorbing all of the ink. Remember, the background of this is white. So as you negative the saturation, it gives it a matte finish, which means it isn't bleeding into the background 100%. And that's why you get this really softening. This is a really nice treatment, negative saturation. If you're doing something old time, if you're doing something raw, kind of like unfinished, you can do a negative saturation in all of your pictures in your advertisement or whatever you're doing for your client, and it gives it kind of that natural, imperfect kind of level of absorbance, and that's kind of nice. So I'll do this sometimes if I'm doing something vintage. So I'm going to crank it up just a little bit to about plus 10. Now, vibrance is the amount of that pure cyan, magenta, yellow, and black going into your image. So the more you crank that up, the more overly saturated the color is, the amount of coverage in the color spectrum of your image. So if you crank that thing way up, you're getting neon. If you crank that thing way down, you're getting that more of that non-saturated, low saturated, even color balance. And so I'm gonna do a plus and a negative just so that it kind of gives it just a little softness inside of its color. So plus 10, minus 10, something in that range. Everyone has a different image, so you'll get a different effect. Thinking about your client, I mean, mine is beautification. So I want the colors to be as rich and vibrant as possible because I'm doing promotional branding for something that needs to look beautiful. So this water needs to be blue, not brown, so that people are willing to donate to my nonprofit. Your kitty cats need to have beautiful color in their hair, vibrant color in their hair. Maybe not the flowers that I took a photo of at Walmart, but, you know, yeah.
So that just raises a question for me. So you're saying that if I was to put a cat that looked like it was dying, that little old women wouldn't want to donate to that little kitty to save its life?
I think that capturing the best of what's meant to be is better than what's worse, the worst side of what could be. Obviously, if they're malnourished, you don't want the hair to look spectacular. But I've never been someone to sell malnourished. I've been the person to promote. If you help, this is what the world could be. Like, did you see the person that tied the dog up on I-75 in Tampa and left? Like, that person, I hope there's cameras on the highway. Like, they were fleeing the road and they didn't want to take the dog, so they tied the dog to a fence post on the highway.
And he was covered in water.
In the path of the hurricane and left. That wouldn't be how I would promote animal rescue.
Right, but I'm saying like if it's laying down, for example, and it's like basically dead.
Well, I don't like that visual. You're making me sad and I don't even see the picture.
I will not get it.
Okay, I'll show you the picture after class.
So you have a sleeping cat laying in a bed.
You could say so. He's a little dirty, but
Okay,
I'll show you.
okay, yes. So you want people to donate because this poor cat is dirty and looks dead and so even if that is the case, so let's say you want to capture the worst of, right? So they're driving around in the news and they're showing all the houses with roofs ripped off and trees falling over and cars flipped upside down. They still open the aperture in the camera to give you the highest experience, highest quality, best light. They don't crank it down and only show it to you. They wait till the sun to come up, and they want the best image of the worst situation that is happening in the world.
They want the Pulitzer.
They want the Pulitzer Prize photo. So even if the dog is malnourished, chained to a dog house in the backyard, doesn't have any water, you can see the bones in the dog. The image they use on the SPCA commercial is highly saturated.
Right. Oh, my question was, would it be possible to use the dying cat?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
That was.
If it's used well.
Right.
So what I'm saying
If I
is,
made it look cute.
yes, if you made the image look good, like it's
I see.
capturing this sad moment, but well.
I see.
But I do try to lean against negativity
I mean, he
and
doesn't look
promotion.
dead. That's the problem.
He
I
does
think
not, or
he's-
he
That's
does?
the problem.
You're just injecting your own personality into the situation?
Well, no, he was dying and he's dead now, but.
Ugh.
So just getting
This
worse.
class just took a downer.
It's true. But
So it's the nature of the beast. I mean, that's how you get people to support what you're trying to promote. So I do totally get it. The moral of the story is, if negativity is a requirement, or the not so good side of what you're promoting, you still want to make sure that what you're using to promote is quality, has good color saturation, has good image quality, right? You don't want it to look crappy and it be a crappy situation, and then no one wants to donate and they blame the designer because it's a really terrible photo. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is a fine line between, I certainly probably wouldn't blow that up as the primary thing. If I'm creating something, I would use it as support. Like, look at how happy these cats are. Oh, and we do have some that aren't so happy, if you know what I mean.
yeah.
But yeah, the moral of the story is, like, when we created logos in Illustrator, we wanted the lines to be smooth. We wanted it to look finished. We wanted to make it a quality vector asset, all the little icons we made. The same for photography. So obviously, I mean, I kind of knew to grab pictures that all had a pretty decent level of brightness and contrast in it, so I don't have to do too much cleanup. There is some weird color shift happening in these. This has got green color, this one's got purple, that one's got kind of a pinkish hue. I'm going to take that out of the photos and make them look more surreal, more natural in my color balance. But you want to make sure the assets are good assets. So when we build it, it's like, man, that's a beautiful thing you created, not a really, well, you had bad pictures, so I did okay with the layout, but it doesn't look good because they're bad pictures. Okay, let's click OK from Vibrance. And we're just going down the menu here. I'm just explaining a few things just so that if you need to adjust your images as we start to build our photo-based media assets, that you have the ability to go in and do some brightness contrast, change the levels a little bit, boost up the grayscale, change the cool or warm color shift, which is what we're doing in hue and saturation. If we grab our hue and crank it to the left, oh my goodness. Man, I feel like a dance party.
It's definitely.
I mean, look at that. Oh man, that is way too warm. Let's go this way.
It's the exact same.
Inverted.
Oh, I couldn't tell.
So I'm going to take the blue out of this picture a little bit. You see how the water's like super green? I'm going to move it a little bit to more the blue side of it. This is what my house looks like in Southwest Florida. Every single photo you see, the water's like so unbelievably blue, even though it isn't unbelievably blue.
It's Bob.
They do a little hue shift over to the blue scale.
So you've edited every photo that you've taken of your house?
I've edited every photo I've taken.
Okay.
I've edited every photo that I've taken. So you can build some really dramatic, so let's say you're doing a nonprofit that uses pink as its primary color. I mean, you could change your hue and your saturation a little bit to the pink side and then soften it in the saturation a little bit to the lighter side of pink. And you could start to build a brand for your nonprofit that includes kind of a pink, oh my gosh. I don't think I would buy cookies from that place.
That's my house.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to now take my saturation level and I'm just going to crank it down just a little bit. So now I have more blue, a little less of that high intensity blue. And I'm going to take my lightness and I'm going to crank it down just a little bit. The projector really doesn't do this justice, but we're getting very close to the natural landscape, taking a lot of that high shift out of the image. Like this looks like the tree, and this looks like the cobblestone building. If I touch pictures, I touch brightness contrast, I touch curves, so I can do a gradual transition of grayscales. So brightness contrast, make sure there's enough light and enough dark in the image. Levels, to make sure that I have a nice curve transition of grayscale in my image. And I traditionally will go in and make a slight adjustment to hue and saturation, because it doesn't matter how good of a picture it is, the light bounces differently across the image. So I try to adjust those three things in all images no matter what. And I do have a look and feel that I like, so I will kind of go towards a certain final effect in my picture just to give it kind of my personal stamp on it, my own personality into it. But depending on your nonprofit, I mean, you could be shifting towards a certain color palette, you could be doing low contrast, high contrast, you could be cranking down the brightness a little bit in the image so it gives it a softer story. You may want to transition the grayscale steeper in the levels of your picture so that you get not a lot of middle tones in your picture, or you might want to move that line and curve it a little bit more towards the middle tones so it kind of looks like it's printed on a piece of glass, kind of has that effect. Images, I mean, that's what people gravitate towards, shapes, colors, pictures, not words. So creating the best feeling of the subject matter that you're targeting towards your target audience can have a really powerful effect. Like I was saying with my buddy's photo business, gosh, every picture he takes makes the walls, the paint on the walls inside the houses look like they were painted like the day he took the picture. They're like perfectly saturated and perfectly bright, and to the point where it's like Jimmy Buffett, like everything is like so bright. So we should have pictures that look well taken, well lit, well balanced, well contrast. Because as we start to build all of our media assets, we want to have good pictures. We don't want to have anything that's fuzzy and dark and gray and muddy, even though that might be your business. We want to make sure that our pictures have a little chutzpah to them, a little bit of good quality to them. Chutzpah. Isn't that a word? Chutzpah?
Yeah, it is.
Chutzpah's a word.
C-H-U-T.
Now I don't ever want to see you again. That is such a weird word. I've never heard that before.
Chutzpah?
Chutzpah?
My mom used to say
Yeah,
it.
it's
Have a little
I think it's
chutzpah.
similar to like moxie.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
A little chutzpah.
Oh,
A little
it's spelled with
spirit.
a C.
Yeah, it's one of the C.
A little spirit.
Interesting.
Yeah, what's the definition?
Extreme self-confidence or audacity.
All right, there you go.
Oh my God, neat.
There you go. Extrovert. Chutzpah.
Never heard that word before.
Chutzpah. All right. Okay, let's click OK. Image adjust color balance. That's the last one we're going to do. So we have brightness contrast, amount of whites and darks in the image. We have our levels, which adjusts our grayscale transition in our images. So we can make them more vivid, a little bit less vivid. Hue and saturation, we can take certain colors out of the color palette of the photo, or we can shift those so they lean more towards a certain color sequence inside your image. Color balance. This one is where you can get pretty drastic in your midtones. This is really, really great image adjustment if you're looking to create a mood. Like if your branding has red inside of its primary color palette, interjecting advertising, promotional material, things that do interject a little bit of that color shift in your images can be really powerful. Doesn't mean you have to go crazy and go all the way to the red side that we have like this really kind of weirdly toxic red image. But it's so subtle. If you just move it just ever so slightly to the red and there's red in your logo, your brain, Home Depot does a really good job of brown and orange. Like they move to the earth tones in all their advertising because they have orange in their logo. So everything has that earth tone quality to it, and all the posters and all the advertising. It's all earthy. None of it is neon. And they are really smart about it. So let's see, I need to go a little bit to the green because mine is Keep Rome Beautiful. And I'm going to shift this ever so slightly to the green. The projector really doesn't do it justice. But this tree is like really, it is springtime and it just got its leaves. And it is like spectacularly green. So let's see what happens if I take my blue out of it, just to soften that water lake a little bit. I'm going to take a little bit of the blue out of the lake. So now this has a little bit more of the natural color of the image. So when using imagery, brightness, contrast, levels, hue, saturation, color balance, all really good adjustments, image adjustments for your photos based on the color palette of your client, just so that you're creating images that reinforce the color palette of your client. So if it's muted colors, it's soft blues, it's green, whatever that color palette is for the brand, you want to make sure that your images are reflective of that range of shades, so that when we use them with your brand, it kind of has a unifying effect to it. So let's try that with a second picture. So let's click OK on our first picture. So now you're going to watch me. You can do it too. I'm going to go over here to my second picture, and I'm going to try to mimic the look and feel of picture number 2 so that it matches picture number 1. So you can see picture number 1 for me has lots of greens. I crank down the blue. I soften the levels so it's a little bit more like a matte, vintage, historic image. I'm going to try to mimic that using my image adjustment settings for image number 2. Now keep in mind, image number 2 has different authorship, so different levels of contrast. It has a different range of grayscales. It may have a different color shift based on the time of day. We want to try to create a series of images that have a similar look and feel. Now, if you took the same picture, if you took all the pictures using your same camera at the same time of day like my buddy does, he shoots every single picture at the same time of day. He actually writes down and makes a batch process and batches every picture with the exact same image adjustments. So they look exactly the same. It doesn't matter if it's an outside photo or an inside photo. A picture of the car in the garage or a picture of furniture on the lanai. He uses the exact same settings in every single picture he takes. So let's adjust the canons here. Image adjust, brightness. I definitely have to boost up the brightness in this and the contrast a little bit because they did it early in the morning or late in the evening. What direction is that facing? You found the part. So Canon. Is that east? Sun rises in the west, sets in east. So this is sunset? Yeah. Yeah, I think it might be. What was the name of that park?
It's the like civic center,
Oh, sorry.
welcome center, whatever.
Yeah. All right, image adjust. I'm going to change the levels. I'm going to adjust my curves. I'm softening this thing up just ever so slightly. And then image adjust. If you adjusted the saturation up on your first picture, more than likely you're going to need to adjust the saturation up in your next photo. If you turned it down to kind of matte finish, kind of soften the ink saturation inside of your image, you're probably going to have to do it with your second one. I cranked mine down in my mill image, so I'm cranking it down in my Canon's image. I made it a little more towards. So now both my pictures have a hint of green, a softness of saturation to make it a little more vintage. I pulled a little bit of the shift of the blue out of it. I tried to do the same treatments to kind of make my first two images kind of have a similar personality. I'm going a little bit more towards vintage. They look good, yeah, the brick color there and brick color, yeah, you did a good job, yeah, very good. Is it that itty bitty or did you just zoom it out?
I just made it smaller.
Okay,
I was gonna say, holy smokes, we might have a little bit of trickery there trying to make our flyer with that.
So we're just adjusting two, just to kind of start to get a feel for making permanent pixel adjustments, because we're affecting these images permanently. First few weeks we were in Illustrator, we were learning a little bit about vector graphics, the fact that they're scalable, that they're made of fill and strokes, that all brands are built in a vector environment so that you can make them the size of a mural or as small as a stamp. We then have put our toe into the pixel-based environment, which is photo-based, which is Photoshop, which is tied to resolution, which means we need really big pictures or really high-resolution assets. And the second half here, we're going to cross over into bringing vector into raster environments just so that we can see the relationship. How often do they change the boxes?
Too
on
often.
the cookies?
Actually, too often. I remember they rebranded 3 times when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
But they also switched out the kinds of cookies that they sell.
The box is smaller too.
Yeah, but very much. It was like $6. I remember them being $3.50 when I was selling it.
curb in front of the Walmart. It's the purest way of getting it.
This, like, this one has one that's like raspberry and toffee, but that's the one in the Midwest.
What's your favorite Girl Scout? I don't think I've ever had. Because they've never been to my Lord, so I don't think I've ever like had the opportunity.
I like the trip one, it's the shortbread one. It's really good, because that's just the Scottish one.
All right. Yeah. So they feel very similar. So you did a good job with that. The right contrast, the levels, they look similar. Keep in mind, just know that when we bring our new document in, we're going to go apply and start playing around with the assets, you build your logo and all that stuff. So you're going to have to duplicate those layers because you have them in there. Okay. Okay. All right. Bless you. All right. Let's set up a new document in Photoshop because we're going to start branding now. We're going to start bringing assets from your style guide into Photoshop so we can start interacting with your pictures and the brand you have built so far. So let's go into Photoshop. And you can keep your images that you have open in Photoshop because we're going to bring some of them in to what we're creating. So let's do File New. Now, here's where we're going to need to set up our dimensions for our document. Now, we're going to make the beginning of like a little flyer here, just so that we can start having some media assets that are advertising based for our style guide. So we'll need a little ad, we'll make a little web banner, we'll make a little flyer, we'll start using your logo assets, your iconography, your typography, all the things from your style guide, and we'll start introducing them into final product environments. So let's make a little 5x7. So let's make it 5 inches wide by 7 inches tall. Make sure that your dimensions are set to inches. We'll do a white canvas or artboard. We will set our resolution to 150. We're going to start in 150 and then we're going to bump it up. But I want to make sure that we have assets, that you guys have assets that are flexible inside the environment we're doing. Now, I would like you to change the color mode to CMYK.
Is it too late to change it? I've already made it.
Now you can go up to image, color mode, image, sorry, and change your Oh, you're okay. Don't do that. My button clicks RGB. You're in CMYK. You're fine. Yeah. All right, so 5x7, 150, CMYK, white background, and click Create. And it should look like that. Now, we're going to start to build the structure of an advertisement. So the first thing I want you to do is to do Command R. So let's make sure our rulers are turned on because we're going to make sure that everything we drop into our design has a happy little spot for alignment purposes. So if you don't have the little rulers run along the top and the left-hand side, make sure you have the little rulers running along the top and the right-hand side. Now, the first thing I would like you to do is I would like you to take one of your photos and I would like you to use the rectangular marquee tool and draw a big box over the entire image. So either do Command A to select all or draw a big box. Now, you'll notice by the proportion of this particular little asset we're building, it is portrait, not landscape. So if it was me, I would probably pick a picture that is portrait, not landscape, that you're copying, because I want you to fill the entire page of the 5x7 in the photo that you copy over to this document. So I'm going to take a look at my photos. Let's see what I have here. I think this one, is this one semi-elongated? Yeah, probably close enough. So I'm going to do Command A for select all, or I could use my rectangular marquee tool and draw a big box around it, right? Draw a big box around it, or I can do Command A to select all, and let's do Command C or Edit Copy, and then I want you to go over to your 5x7 and do Command V. Now, if that image is a pretty big image, it should fill your entire document. If it is not a pretty big picture, it's going to be slightly short of the entire document. For the sake of the demo, for the interactive lecture, we're going to scale that up a little bit. That is not best practice, is scaling images up, because it will make them a little pixelated. But for the sake of the process, so that we have an image that fills the whole background, let's make sure that your image fills the whole background. Now I actually have to make mine a little bit smaller because it's way too big. So make your image fill your 5x7 background. Because this is going to be our background image for our little flyer here. So all we did was open up a photo, hopefully that's in portrait, something that's taller than wide. We did select all. You can either do that with the rectangular marquee tool, draw a big box around it, or you can do Command A to select it. Wow, did that fill in like that? Didn't have to switch it. Really big, that's great. Yep, very good. Yep. Just had her eye. That is really big. Okay, so let's make sure that our image kind of fills our page. Now here, this is a really interesting aspect of design, is that we need to find an area of the image of interest. So let's just talk a little bit about processing inside of advertising, right? Viewers read top left to lower right. So, and the focal point traditionally is in the middle of the document. So as you're scaling and positioning your background image, try to make it where the focal point, the thing that you would like the viewer to process first, is towards the middle of the page. I used to do this with my students with the projector. Like I would project it and then I would hold up a piece of paper and say, okay, what part of the image is the part I want people to, process or see. It's a really interesting trick, because like that right there is a really interesting focal point to the picture. So see if you can't, and look how different it is with landscape. Like landscape is weird. See if you can find a position of your photo inside your 5x7 that has interest, a focal point. Because that's going to be the foundation of our flyer. So if it's a really great picture centered in someone's face, obviously the focal point is their face right in the middle of the page. You're an illustrator. So hop over to Photoshop. There you go. Yeah, perfect. So any of those. And do File New 5x7. And then you'll be right where we are. 5x7, 150, CMYK. All right, good. So everyone should have a full bleed picture. Now, let's go to our style guide inside Illustrator. And I would like you to select, yes, that's okay. For the sake of this demo, just scale it up. So even if it will distort it a little bit, but we need a full bleed, so it's okay. Yeah, for you, we would be leaning towards the landscape 5x7 versus portrait. For the sake of the demo, just go ahead and click your move tool. Yeah, and just check your show transform controls. You see that little box right up there? And then you get your bounding box. All right, yeah.
It's still showing the thing.
Yeah.
All right. What do we have? It's just huge. It looks like. You click that little show transform control stuff. and let's grab our logo. So I'm going to go over to my style guide, and I'm going to grab my logo. So make sure you have all the parts of your logo, right? So make sure it's all the letters, it's the symbol, it's your full main logo. And then let's do Command C, which is copy. So we're copying our logo out of Illustrator and we're pasting it into Photoshop. So let's go over to Photoshop and let's do Command V. And you should get this menu. Now, we want to paste it as a smart object. We want to paste it so it maintains its vector form. So let's do smart object and click OK. So smart object, OK. And here it is. Now, you should immediately be able to tell the difference, right? The photos are pixels, and this thing is fills and strokes. So you can see the difference here. Now, you're also probably seeing that there are aspects of your logo that are different, that you might be able to see or not be able to see very well. Your image is kind of, your background image is kind of controlling how well your little logo is working inside of this particular layout. Hence the reason we did a black and white logo. We did a full color logo. We did our logo in different formats so that when we use it, there are flexible ways to apply it. So now, traditionally in advertising, you have call to action towards the top, support copy in the middle, branding in the bottom. So I would like you to scale your logo down and find a happy little place over here in the right-hand corner that is in the negative space of your background photo. So I'm going to scale mine down and kind of put it in this little corner over here towards the bottom of the page. Now, it should scale proportionately. So if you grab it, it should just diagonally go down. And I'm going to find a spot right over here in the corner, but you are going to see the problem I am going to have. What? I know, we're going to have to do something. I know. Yes. Just give it a second. Yeah. So let's scale it down and find a little corner spot here. We have some tricks. We're going to obviously have some challenges. Okay, so let's go up to, so check that little show transform box. So you see the show transform box? Right up there, you're up there, next one there. All right, now, so now zoom out, the man's mind. There's the corner of your image. Grab that corner and scale it down. Now here is the challenge, and the reason our brand manual, our style guide, when we built it, we made a color version, we made a black and white version, was because color, it doesn't always work. It's not always capable of being used as an object on top of something because the something is really colorful, really busy, doesn't work well with our image. So let's see what happens here. So we have our color logo. The thing you should not do is put a white box around it, which is what you see sometimes in advertising where they just put a little white box around it, and it looks like it was cut out of the piece of paper. Like the photo's there and they cut out a piece of paper and they stuck the logo underneath it. You should not box in assets, which means pictures shouldn't have little white boxes around them with pictures inside of them. Logos shouldn't have little white boxes around them. And I'll give you a prime example. Any event that happens on campus here that is sponsored by a bunch of companies, how many times do you look at that and there's a box around some of the logos? Every single time. Because the logo doesn't, every logo doesn't fit the background of the thing you're trying to create, right? So you put little boxes around them, or the logo has a box around it, and because it has a white background, and you just copy and paste it and put it in there, and some blend in the background, and some have little boxes around them. Ideally, all logos should feel like they're on the same plane. So like if you have some logos that are transparent and some that have a white box around it, then you should either make a consistent color or make them all white logos or all black logos or all whatever color logo it is that works with the design. Like Martha Blues, it was all neon colors with black and grayscale.
If you took the alternative logo where the text is black, couldn't you just change the text to white?
You could. So I'm going to show
That's
you.
why I just did this.
I'm going to show you something. So let's scale down our logo so that it kind of fits in the corner here. Now, don't make it too close to the right. Don't make it too close to the bottom. Give it a little bit of room so that it's kind of sitting in the corner here. A little bit of room on the right-hand side, a little bit of room on the left-hand side. And when you have it scaled, you can go ahead and hit enter or return. Now, let's go over to our layer properties. So right over here in the gray area of your now newly created Vector Smart Object layer. So right over here in your layers palette, so you have a background layer, you have a layer number 1, which is the picture you copied and pasted in, and then your next layer right here is your Vector Smart layer. Don't double click on the name Vector Smart Object, double click on the layer properties, which will give you this menu right here. Now, the easiest way to make your logo stand out from the background are a couple of options. One is we could do an outer glow on it, so we could give it a white outer glow. So let's click on the name outer glow. If you click on the name outer glow, it checks the box and you get the settings for outer glow. Probably your settings are white with some level of bleed or opacity and some level of spread, like the size of the glow. Watch if I crank this thing all the way up to like 100%. I crank down the spread, I crank down the size. You can start seeing what's happening. Now, the easiest way to separate a logo from a background, if it's a light color background, you put a drop shadow on it. If it's a dark color background, you put an outer glow on it. If it's a light color background, the drop shadow is black. If the background is dark, the outer glow is light. So all you're doing is building a layer of separation between the logo that we copied in, which is vector-based, so we can scale it up and scale it down, and the background itself. So that's number 1. Let's uncheck outer glow, and let's check color overlay. And let's change the color overlay to white, and let's make the opacity 100%. Your logo is now officially white. Yep, and white. Nope, that's okay. Crank it up to 100%. Bada bing, bada boom. You now have a white logo. Lots of times, as long as your logo is shapes, which is why we made our logos in Illustrator with shapes, is you can make it white. White doesn't hurt anyone. It doesn't kill the brand. Black logos don't hurt anyone. Doesn't kill the brand. Black and white is the foundation of... Now, you can also really quickly tell how good your logo is. Because if you make it all white, can you still tell what the thing is over it?
It's a lighthouse.
Is the type still legible? I mean, does it still look like something? I mean, if your logo is all black and it works, or your logo is all white and it works, then you've hit a home run, in essence, with your logo because the shapes themselves are recognizable, right? Color and shape is the number one thing that people process when they're absorbing messaging. Color first, shape two. So if you make it all white and you can tell the shapes, then your case is just double click right in the gray area here. Not right click, double click. Alright, so let's go to color overlay. So click on the word color overlay so we can put it in. Make that white. Yep, there you go. All the way up to white. Yep, good. Click OK. And click OK. It's 100%. There's your logo in white. Can you tell it's a bed or can you tell any of the things? Let's make the logo a little bit bigger now. Now, pick what works for your logo. If you don't like it as a white overlay, uncheck the color overlay and go back to a glow or try a shadow. The key is we want the logo to be legible and readable, and we want it separated from the background. We don't want you not to be able to see like what that thing is. Branding is important. So if it's too small, now that you're kind of looking at it, let's make it a little bit bigger. I actually like the color overlay on mine, so I think I'm going to keep it that way. And I'm going to make it a little bit bigger down in the corner here. Maybe not that big, but a little bit bigger. Can you do more than one effect?
Yes.
Yes. So if you do a color overlay and it's still a little lost back there, it's better, but it's still a little lost. I can double click on the layer and add a drop shadow. So I'm going to add a drop shadow now.
Is it 7 pixels? Okay, it's 7 pixels.
Well, let's click OK. What happened?
It's
I was
okay,
in
just
pixels, not inches.
yeah, 7 pixels.
All right.
It's okay. It
Yeah.
happens.
Maybe. Yeah, I would copy that one, and then I would put an outer glow on that one, just to separate it from the background. Yeah, I think for you, the color one's a little bit better with the fill shapes. Well, that looks nice. Nice and good. Oh, this corner over here. Okay, all right, put a shadow on yours. Get off the corner a little bit.
Is it okay if I keep mine white?
Yeah, if you like it white and it works well
It
white.
looks better white. That's rather than like the orange.
Oh, it does, yeah. Just get it off the edge a little bit. Get it away from the corner a little bit. So let's use our rulers and give us a little safety area around our document. So with Command R, let's pull down some ruler lines. So I want you to pull from the top. I want you to draw a little bit, about a 1/4 of an inch space here, about a 1/4 of an inch space here. Let's pull from the left ruler, about a 1/4 of an inch space there, and about a 1/4 of an inch space there. And your logo should be inside that corner. So don't put it so close to the edge. So pull the ruler line down. Give it a little bit of a picture frame, just a little space around it. I use rulers for everything. Command R. There they are. Just a little bit of room. Because we're going to have to bring a couple of pictures in. We're going to have to put our little call to action item. Now, important aspects of the style guide as we're making our little flyer here. A, the logo, which we created in Inspector Art. B, the font we defined in our style guide, because any words we write on this have to be in the exact same font from our style guide. So don't introduce anything new. Any aspects we use have to match the style guide. So, just for the sake of the process, why don't we bring in one of your icons? So select one of your icons, copy it, paste it into our new 5x7 document, make it really big, and cover like 2/3 of the page. So pick any of your icons, just so that we can get the comfort level of copying out of our style guide and pasting into our Photoshop file. So I'm going to go over to my style guide. I'm going to grab my flower. I'm going to come back into my Photoshop file, and I'm going to paste my flower as a smart object. And here it is. Now, we're just doing this as practice, just so that you can see copying elements out of your style guide and bringing it into a pixel environment as a smart object. So logo in as a smart object, our icon in as a smart object. Now, the reason we drew our icons as line art like this is so that we could go in and we could do things like fill them. So I'm going to fill this in white. So there it is, just like the logo. So now this thing matches my logo down here. Hopefully it's kind of the same style. I'm just going to kind of move it in there, just so that you can see the difference. This is Packaging Design 101. Bringing pictures in with vector art, putting them into a final composition, whether it's the front of a bag, whether it's the inside of a bag, the front of a box. Like, it's the interaction of pixels and vector smart objects. Pixels and fills and strokes. And how that relationship interacts is how your design interacts. And you can look on Facebook or any social media platform you use, and all the ads that pop up and feed your brain over and over again with brand, it's always shapes of fills and strokes and photographs. Shapes of fills and strokes and photographs. Mountain Dew. All those swipes of color, all those letters of typography, and an occasional picture. Fills and strokes combined with pixels. So that's the hardest is fills and strokes, in my opinion. So hopefully as we kind of do the intro to design here, and we evolve from Illustrator to Photoshop, and Photoshop to InDesign, hopefully there's some aspect of some application we use where you're like, yeah, I can do that. I like this one, or, oh my gosh, don't ever give me the pencil again, because I do not want to draw a single thing. All right? They all have their own skills. They all have their own kind of application. So, all right, very good. So we copied our logo in. We started to see the scalability of vector and how it looks compared to pixels. We did Command R so we could make sure we could start to place our elements in ways that are safe, like things that matter are safe. So that's what our ruler lines are for. We're in a portrait kind of framework here. So now we have original things we created combined with photos we found. So we're starting to go across kind of in those two things. Let's rename our layers over here, because it really is best practice to name your layers. So instead of that saying vector smart object, I'm going to double click on the name vector smart object, and I'm going to call mine flower. So whatever that icon is that you brought in, let's name them appropriately. So let's double click on the first vector smart and call it logo. So you should have a background layer, which is white. You should have a photo, which is named whatever the photo is. So mine is bridge. You should have a logo layer and an icon layer, like a symbol, whatever that thing is you copied in. Just so that we can start interacting in pieces of paper. We're basically stacking pieces of paper. Now, I want to put a smaller picture on top of our background picture. So let's pick one of the other pictures that you have in your photography folder, and let's select all for that picture. So I'm going to take I don't love that one. Let me see what I have here. Clock tower's fine. So I'm going to, let me grab my clock tower. I'm going to do select all with my second picture, so Command A, or you can draw a big rectangular marquee tool selection box over it. My rectangular marquee, I can just draw a big box over it. Let's copy it, Command C, and let's bring it into our new little 5x7 by doing Command V. And now, I'd like you to use your Move tool and make it smaller. I'm going to shrink this thing down. And we're just going to put this picture over top of the other picture. Now, depending on where you pasted it, it might be behind your logo, or it might be behind your flower icon, or whatever your icon was. Let's bring it in first and make it a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller, drop it in kind of over here. I'm going to hit return to apply my scale, and then I'm going to take the layer that was created, and let's make sure it's all the way at the top. So let's click on the layer and drag it to the top. So you see how you can click and hold your mouse down and change the order of the stacks of your paper? Just make sure that that new image you brought in is on the top. So you can either move the flower or your icon down, or you can move the new image up. So let's just move it up so it's at the top. And then let's name it, the layer, what it is. So you should have a small image, that's the top layer. You should have your logo and your icon as your next two layers. You should have your background image, whatever that big picture is you put in the background, as the second to last, or second from the bottom, and then the white background, which is your canvas, should be your bottom. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. Now, once you have that image in, scale it down and kind of find a happy little spot for it somewhere, in the negative space area of your primary picture, somewhere where there's a little spot you can sneak it in. And then I would like you to double click and go into the layer style of your layer. So double click in the gray area of that new smaller, and just add a drop shadow to it, just so it gives it a little dimensionality. So let's click on the word drop shadow and put a little drop shadow on the picture. All we're doing is separating this picture from the background picture. So double click in the little gray area of your new smaller image and put a little bit of a shadow on it, a little bit of a drop shadow on it. And all we're doing is building a little dimensionality, giving it a little separation. So it looks like that little picture is like a sticker on top of the background image. So copying out of Illustrator into Photoshop requires smart objects. Smart objects are scalable shapes of fills and strokes, not pixels. So we can scale it as big or as small as we want, and it still has its perfect clarity. Now, once it's in to Photoshop as a smart object, it does give us some Photoshop features as a smart object. And some of those features are drop shadows, glows, strokes around the shape, color fills or color overlays where you can change the color of it. You don't have access to all of what Photoshop has to offer as a vector smart object or as an Illustrator file copied in, because remember, it is fills and strokes and it isn't pixels. So Photoshop has lots of features that are manipulating pixels. The smart object is not pixels. The smart object is fills and strokes. So we have layer styles, so we can do basic things with our smart objects, but we can't do everything in Photoshop. So we'll take a look after fall break, the things we can do how we can have access to more features in Photoshop using something you drew in Illustrator. But we don't have access to all of it yet. It would be nice to put a little stroke around the small picture, I think. So why don't we put a drop shadow on the little small picture, and let's put a little stroke around the picture. So we're going to click on the word stroke, and I'm just going to make it a little 2-pixel white box around it. And I just chose white because my logo is white. Maybe you would like a black stroke around your picture if you made your logo black, dominantly black. If it's your full color and it worked as full color inside your little layout, you can always click on the little color picker and change the stroke to a color that more matches your logo. If you were able to use your color logo. I'm going to guess most of your backgrounds were busy, so the full color logo probably was tricky with most of you unless you put an outer glow on your logo. But so now we're interacting in Photoshop with your style guide. Your style guide includes photography, so that's kind of the foundation of the pictures we're using. Those are the pictures that are out of our style guide. We're using the logo that's uniquely yours that we printed and posted all over the walls. So you created your own shapes, your own typography. We've been able to extract that out of Illustrator and bring it into Photoshop, and it's working perfectly because it is a smart object, which means it's scalable, which is what every business that you will ever work for. They will have a brand manual with Illustrator or EPS, shapes of fills and strokes. That's their logo. And they may ask you to import it into Premiere and overlay it on a video, or bring it into Photoshop and make a little advertisement for them, or bring it in to Dreamweaver and add it to their website. Just know that the logo is going to be shapes of fills and strokes. It's not going to be pixels. So you're going to be bringing an EPS file in or a smart object out of Illustrator. So this is just the kind of the put the toe in the water of branding, copying logos you created and bringing them into a Photoshop environment, a pixel-based or photo-based environment. We're also going to bring your logo into Adobe Animate and make it animate. Cat run across the page, whatever the thing is that you have. Maybe my river goes across the screen and my mountains raise up from my letters. All vector scalable shapes that we can do different things for. All right, very good. So we brought a background picture in. We brought in 2 vector graphics. One was your logo. The other one was an icon. We've in essence used 2 photos from your style guide. One is a background graphic and one as an image insert, which is what this little image is called. Now, we need to add a call to action to our little flyer here. So part of your homework was to dig up some kind of posters or flyers or advertisement, some kind of way that your nonprofit kind of promotes itself to the outside world. We need a phrase, a caption, a campaign idea, a tagline, something to write on our flyer that would make people be like, yeah, I want to give money to that, or yeah, I want to volunteer. So whatever that thing is that you found inside of your research for your advertisement, it's got to be a short, compact statement, like, you know, support green, or, you know, I don't know, cats are cute. I don't know what your nonprofit call to action is, but let's add our call to action. So let me go over here to my I'm going to pull up mine really quickly. Let's see here. Keep Floyd, or Keep Rome Beautiful advertisement. Mine is long. I remember it from before. Creating a more beautiful community together. Creating a more beautiful community together. So your nonprofit should have some kind of compact action item when you did research for your nonprofit. It might be on their website, right on their homepage, like what they're saying as their mission, as their like main statement to get you involved in the organization. We need that statement so that we can add it to our little flyer. So mine's creating a more beautiful community together. So when you have your statement let's go into our Photoshop design and let's use our text tool. So you see the little T tool over here? Let's use our text tool. So let's take our text tool and tap it right in the top of your design, and let's type in your slogan. Creating a more beautiful community. What was it? Creating a more beautiful community together. All right, that's mine. That's not yours, that's mine. Now, a couple of things we need to do. The first thing we need to do is make sure we're using the font that is the font for your nonprofit that we determined and put in your style guide. So if it's Avenir, it needs to be Avenir. If it's Comic Sans, it needs to be Comic Sans. If it's Helvetica or Garamond or whatever the font is, we need to make sure we use the font that we defined in our style guide. That is branding, 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 branding. Make sure it's exactly the same. Companies spend a lot of money having their own font designed for their logo just so that they can use it on stuff and it's unique to theirs. Oprah magazine, Oprah paid a typographer to design the font not only for Oprah magazines and Oprah's logo, but they wrote her entire magazine in that font. So fonts should be respected, should be appreciated, should be loved. I'm still pitching the idea that we have a typography class. I'm hoping to get a little momentum on that because I absolutely love typography, and I think that. Huh?
Dr. Carroll will fight you.
I know. I think Kurt's on board though, so that's all that matters. Okay, so let's make sure that we're using the appropriate typeface. So let's make sure that we have our typeface set correctly. Now, as you're typing it in, it's just like Word. So I can highlight it just like Word by tapping on our typeset. So double clicking on our typeset to select it. Now, if you don't have, you should have the type properties right up here for your typography. If you do not, under your window drop down, you will see character. You can always open up your character palette, which is what is over here on the right hand side of my screen. You can always open up your character palette if you don't see it at the top of the screen here. So I need to make mine. I think I used Avenir. I must have used Avenir because I always use Avenir. So I'm going to switch it to Avenir, and I'm going to try it in white, I think, just to see if it stands out in the background there. Now, so make sure that your call to action or your little short statement, your little mission matches your nonprofit, what they do. Now, here's where the next trick comes in. We need to make the font small enough that we can fit it towards the top of our design. So it's got to be small enough, but it can't be super small. So it can't be 9, 10, 11 point. It needs to be like 12 point, 14 point, 16 point, 18 point, 24 point. It needs to be larger because it's our call to action. And if your statement is long, it's perfectly okay to make it more than one line. So I'm actually going to take my cursor and hit return. And I'm going to switch over to my move tool just to see how big this thing is. Creating a more beautiful community together. So I'm going to try to make, I think I need to make it maybe 3 lines. I'm going to see what happens here. So see if you can make it fit towards the top of your page a little bit like that. And the last little piece to the puzzle as it relates to our call to action is our type alignment. So when you have your text highlighted and you change the size of it and you make it 2 or 3 lines if you need to, and it fits towards the top of your page, let's make the alignment work. So try left align, try center align, try right align. Let's see if we can find a spot for this to fit kind of in our negative space, so I made it right on. And when you have all those pieces together, let's save it as our flyer. So let's name it as our client name, which is your nonprofit name, and flyer.psd. And that's where we'll stop today. Now, this weekend is fall break, so have a good break, take an exhale, don't think about me or this class, even though you'd like to. Enjoy your 4 days, hopefully you get to do something fun. We have some friends coming in town, so we're gonna do something fun.
What are you doing?
Yes, that's what we're gonna put it for, but not yet. Yeah, not yet. Yeah, we're gonna add a few pieces and then we'll give it to you. So just make sure you save this, and everybody have a good long weekend, and I'll see you guys in 4, 5, 6 days. Not yet, no, not yet, just save it, not gonna turn it in yet. We're gonna make a version of this into a slightly different proportion. Next class, not yet. Good job. Have a good Thursday.